Hello everyone, my name's Daniel, and today we're going to answer the question, or help you answer the question of, can you identify a false prophet? Now, many superheroes have an evil twin at some point, and they impersonate the hero and wreak havoc. And we're told in the last days to expect many people to come in the name of Christ. And of course, we're going to have the ultimate false prophet with the Antichrist and his false prophet. So you need to be able to identify it. But there's this problem. Everyone is pointing fingers at each other. Right? It's this giant conspiracy. You know, is this other Bible teacher, this other YouTube channel, this other pastor, are they the false prophet? How are we going to know? Right? Because all these teachers are pointing fingers at everyone who disagrees with them, right? Oh, post-tribbers are false prophets. Pre-tribbers are false prophets. And they're being pointed in everyone's direction. And it's exactly like this picture of three Spider-Mans all pointing who's the false one, who's the real one. And that's where we are. And there's this video here from Chris and Jack, which I think...
Freeze! Both of you!
Trust me, Greg. You gotta take him out. No, it's me, man. Trust me, I'm the real me.
How can I tell?
Just ask me something that you know the real me would know. What's your name? Your full name? Peter Randolph Thompson.
Wait, your middle name's Randolph?
Yes.
All right. You have to go check out that full clip. Chris and Jack have lots of funny things out there. But the situation there is exactly what's going on. There's lots of false prophets out there, false teachers, and we're all, in Chris's shoes, trying to figure out who's the real one so we can determine who to vaporize. Or maybe who Yah is going to vaporize. In any event, you don't want to follow the false prophet, but how can you tell when they look so similar? So, these accusations of calling people false prophets is a major issue in itself, because you shall not go around and slander among your people, and you shall not stand up against the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will not escape. So if you're accusing someone of being a false prophet and they're not, you're in dangerous territory, right? Because the punishment for a false accusation is equal to the consequences such an accusation would have on the other person. So, you accuse someone and you're pronouncing that they're going to go through judgment and all that, and it's false. What are you at risk of coming back your own way? So, in this particular case, this post was inspired by a Nelson Walters video where he's identifying end-time false prophets. And he singled out everyone who teaches pre-tribulation rapture as being a false prophet. Well, that would be me. And I don't consider myself a false prophet. And so, who's right? And who's the false prophet? So let's see what the Bible has to say. So, in this video, Nelson Walters quotes Matthew 24 about people that come in the name of Christ and lead many people astray. And he lumps everyone who teaches pre-tribulation rapture into the same category as the other false prophets in the days of Jeremiah, who said that the sword will not come and that you will not be judged. And of course, Jeremiah says you will be judged and taken into captivity. So his point was that Jeremiah was teaching that they would suffer and go into captivity, and the false prophets were teaching that people wanted to hear. And so by this standard that he invented, he claims that pre-tribulation teachers are telling people what they want to hear, that they will not suffer through the tribulation, and therefore they are false prophets that Jesus was warning us about. And then he links it because of people coming in my name, and the only other place that is used is in Jeremiah. So he's claiming that Yeshua was quoting or referencing Jeremiah in Matthew 24. So here's Matthew 24. Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And Yeshua answered them, see that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. Now, he agrees with me on this, is that I am the Christ is actually, but I am anointed, or I'm speaking in the name of Yeshua. They're saying that Yeshua is Messiah, and they're coming in his name and saying, I'm anointed by him to teach. And they will lead many astray. Matthew 24 goes on to say, and many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, but he that shall endure, which this is the Strong's number here, I'll get to that in a bit. He that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. So he's using this to teach you must endure to the end of the tribulation to be saved. So his interpretation is that end means end of tribulation, because that's part of the argument for post-trib. You got to endure to the end. But he never asked himself what it means to endure to the end, and we'll get to that in a second. So surely this does not mean that everyone who survives is saved, and those who do not survive are not. And if you survive until the end of the tribulation, what exactly are you being saved from? And if this isn't about saving your life from the tribulation, but eternal salvation, then the end must mean the end of your life and not the end of the tribulation. And with that one detail, his use of this verse as evidence of post-tribulation falls apart, because it cannot mean end of tribulation and end of your life at the same time. But in the midst of all this, he's missing the bigger picture, right? His fear is that those expecting a rapture salvation will not be prepared to suffer if the rapture doesn't happen, right? Nelson is not claiming, right? If our interpretation, my interpretation of pre-trib is wrong, and we end up going into the tribulation, he's saying that that will cause people to fall away. And that's why this is a dangerous heresy to teach people or interpret Scripture that as being pre-tribulation. So I don't believe he's claiming that only those who live through the tribulation are saved, because he's expecting you to die as a martyr and you will be saved. But that people turn from Yeshua when the promised rapture does not occur. Anyone putting their interpretation of Scripture so high as to fall away if it does not occur is in danger, right? So so when it doesn't happen as they expect, they would be committing the same error as the Bible teachers of Yeshua's day, right? They expected a conquering king and rejected Yeshua because he was the suffering servant. He didn't fit their interpretation, and so they missed his coming. So Nelson's argument is, if you're teaching a false teaching, false of pre-trib, and pre-trib doesn't happen, and you're going into the tribulation, you might fall away because you were expecting that. But that's a very, that cuts both ways. Is Nelson going to fall away if he misses the rapture? Or if the temple isn't rebuilt or sacrifices don't resume, as he interprets? What about everyone that he teaches? Does their faith depend upon their interpretation of prophecy being fulfilled exactly as they expect or as taught by Nelson and other teachers? So it's very dangerous to hook your faith on your interpretation of Scripture. Because chances are that we are all wrong about something. So, if we've been studying and we're expecting pre-trib, and then all of a sudden destruction occurs and all this other stuff, hey, we'll realize, that we were wrong and these other interpretations were true. But if you're expecting post-tribulation, then and then pre-trib happens and sudden destruction happens, you might not be as prepared as you think. So let's talk about enduring to the end. Here's how Scripture defines enduring of the saints. Here is the endurance, which is the noun form of the verb used by Yeshua earlier. Here's the endurance of the saints, those keeping the commandments of God and the faith of Yeshua. So the thing that we are to endure in is not life, but our obedience to his commands and our trust in Yeshua for salvation. And we are to endure either until the end of our life or the rapture. So, is Nelson teaching people to keep the least of the commands? Woe to you, teachers of the laws and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. Today's teachers do the opposite. They ignore the smaller commands and assume only justice, mercy, and faithfulness are expected. But Yeshua says, without neglecting the smaller things. And Yeshua also says, anyone who sets aside the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Some translations suggest it might be nothing in the kingdom of heaven. I don't want to be on that end of the spectrum. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. They will teach you that some things have been removed from the law. For I tell you truly, until heaven and earth pass away, not a single jot, not a single stroke of a pen will disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. And then they will twist Paul's words. There are some things in them, Paul's letters, that are hard to understand, which the ignorant and unstable twist to their own destruction, as they do other scriptures. Therefore, beloved, knowing this beforehand, take care that you are not carried away with the air of lawless people and lose your own stability. So lawless people are unstable. The unstable twist to their destruction. So, let's read about the Antichrist and the false prophet that we need to be able to detect. And then the lawless one, the Antichrist, will be revealed, who the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and annihilate by the majesty of his arrival. The coming of the lawless one will be accompanied by the working of Satan, with every kind of power, sign, and false wonder, or lying wonder, and with every kind of wicked deception directed against those who are perishing, because they refused to love the truth that would have saved them. For this reason, God will send them a powerful delusion that they will believe a lie, in order that judgment may come upon all who have disbelieved the truth and delighted in wickedness, unrighteousness, or lawlessness. Deuteronomy gives us the instructions on how to overcome this very issue. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder he tells you comes to pass. Lying wonders and signs that come to pass are exactly what the Antichrist is going to do. So if you're trusting in those things to determine who is a true or false prophet, you're trusting in the wrong thing. All right? So, whether someone predicts the date right or not is not a measure of whether or not they are a true or false prophet. And if he says, let us go after other Elohim, gods or authorities, which you have not known, and let us serve or obey them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you, to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. He's testing you. So if someone comes and they want you to go after other gods and to obey them, right, contrary to obeying what we've been received through the scriptures, he's testing us to know whether we love him. So the Antichrist and all his lying wonders is a test for us to see whether or not we are going to follow the miracles or follow his commands. Right? Because to know whether or not you love the Lord your God. In 1 John 5:3, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, to know whether or not you will keep the commandments of your God. So now we have the scriptural test of a false prophet, someone who teaches others to disregard the commands of God. Any teacher that is not preparing people with this test sets them up to be deceived by the Antichrist and false prophet. Right? In Psalms 119, 142 says, your righteousness is righteous forever, and your law is true. Right? They refused to love the truth. Your law is the truth. So, what are the consequences of post-tribulation teaching? Nelson is worried about the consequences of pre-tribulation teaching, but have post-tribulation teachers really thought about the consequences of people believing that they will have to go through the tribulation? Consider Luke 21:36. Watch ye therefore, and pray always that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass and stand before the Son of Man. If you're teaching people that they must go through the tribulation, are they going to make this prayer? Are they going to watch and pray that they can escape? Why would they pray to escape if they believe that they have to go through? If they believe that praying to escape is something that a false teacher would teach. And then we have Matthew 26 and Mark and Luke, which say, watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. Now, the word translated temptation is the Greek word for trial or test, right? And consider even the Lord's Prayer. And lead us not into temptation or trial or tribulation, but deliver us from the evil one, the Antichrist, also quoted in Luke. So the Greek word here is the accusative form of which generally means temptation or trial or testing in English. Now, is it temptation or is it trial or testing? Well, consider this. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But he does try us. He does test us. Right? You shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. So he will test us to see if we will keep his commandments. And that is what the tribulation becomes. In the context of this temptation is watching. Right? We're watching for his return. So the temptation or the testing is the testing of the tribulation. Right? Because you have kept the word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial, sudden destruction in a single hour, Babylon the Great, that is coming upon the whole world to try those who dwell on the earth. So we're supposed to pray that we can escape, that he will not lead us into the trial or testing that's going to come upon the earth. All right? And of course, patient endurance. So the tribulation is a trial testing for those who dwell on the earth, but those who have kept the word about my patient endurance are kept from this hour of trial. If you've already been keeping his commandments, he doesn't need to test you anymore. Here's the endurance of the saints, those keeping the commandments of God and the faith of Yeshua. So, post-tribbers teach that, hey, you have to go through the tribulation to prove what you're made out of. You know, everyone else had to suffer. Why do you think you're special and get to rapture or escape? Well, our trial, our test every day is whether or not we're going to keep his commandments. And if you've passed that test, there's no need for you to go into the tribulation. You've already passed the test of, are you willing to obey as best as you can? Perfect obedience is not required. It's about your heart. Do you want to obey? Do you desire to obey? Then you pass. Do you not want to obey? Do you want to dismiss or claim it's not necessary? Now you failed the test. So I asked Grok to summarize Nelson Walter's teachings on topics like Sabbath and dietary law, but was unable to find any clear documentation other than that he's likely a traditional evangelical Christian and most likely does not warn people to be careful to keep all the commandments. If I'm wrong, I would love to see a video where he warns people about the endurance of the saints. So we need to be very careful throwing around accusations of being a false prophet just because of misinterpretation of the writings of the true prophets. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So for this reason, I do not judge, I try not to, those who disagree with me over the interpretation of prophecies as false teachers. Maybe it is a post-tribulation rapture. I've been wrong before. Let each person test the scriptures and draw their own conclusions. But don't be like the teachers of Yeshua's day who rejected him because he didn't fit their interpretation of Scripture. So don't be so confident that you understand all the prophecies, that you know that you're looking for a peace treaty and a 7-year pact with Israel signed by the Antichrist. Now, if you're looking for that and that doesn't happen, you might be caught by surprise. And I think that so much of our end times teaching has existed for so long, and things were sealed up till the end, and these teachings have, were started in the Catholic Church, and we've adopted them. I would be very, very careful assuming that they got it right all those years ago, and just be humble about your ability to interpret and be open to watch what happens and accept that maybe you could be wrong, right? You have to consider all the different potential interpretations and then see which of those interpretations matches up. If you're only expecting a conquering king and a suffering servant comes, you're going to miss him. But if you say, oh, there's actually 2 interpretations, this one fits. Now you have a better chance of understanding the prophecies and not missing them. I pray this teaching has blessed you, and I'll see you later, Lord willing.